this week's Wellbeing Show. I forgot. I went totally blank then. I was like, what am I doing? Oh, that thing I do every Wednesday evening, the Wellbeing Show. Well, it's 9 o'clock UK. It's the 14th of January. I've got a great guest on tonight, Peter Larkum, who has a company called Mentality. We're going to be hearing all about that. Just before we jump into the interview, the conversation, the chat, the grilling, the terrible time that I give to people. Everybody runs away in tears, Peter, by the end of the show. I'm telling you, mate. Not you, though. You'll be able to stand up to me. Before we get into that, just want to remind you, it is live. If you're listening to this on the 14th, between 9 and 10 UK time, it's live. It'd be lovely to hear from you. Drop me a line on WhatsApp. It's +44 7506 319 745. We're streaming on various platforms, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. And if you're sort of catching us one of those, do drop us a message. And James, if he manages to stay awake, will sort of see the messages and pass them on to me, hopefully. James, are you awake? Oh, we won't answer. He's probably already gone to sleep. James is my techie. In the early days of this show, Peter, we used to do it at a place called Men's Radio Station, which was an actual radio station. And people could see James, and because we filmed it live as well. And we were in a physical location, and then we shifted when the pandemic came, and we lost James. It's a tragedy. But I just want to reassure people, he's still there. But he's got a lot more hair these days, folks, from those that remember him from the men's radio station days. He looks clean cut. He doesn't anymore. He looks haggard and broken by life. But there you go. So young and so broken. Welcome, Peter. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good to have you with us.
It's actually very nice to be here.
Is it?
Yeah, it is. It's a nice break from the norm. I have four kids.
I'm often told that I'm a nice break from the norm.
I have four kids that we've just been through the whole bedtime chaos.
Have you?
With and yeah,
so
this is
difficult to get into bed then. Do they have to work hard to get daddy to sleep?
pretty much. Well, most times we read a story and I'm gone by the end of the story. Is the reality? It's when your kid elbows you in the ribs because you're snoring too loud instead of reading the book. That's what I normally get.
That's about right. I think that's the truth. I never have the energy. But welcome. Where are you anyway? You somewhere in Outer Mongolia, I think, isn't it?
I could literally be anywhere in the world. I am in Winchester, Hampshire. So if you know the UK geography, find the Isle of Wight and then go north by about 15 miles and you pass Southampton and you get to a little village, a little town. Well, it's actually a city called Winchester. Yeah. It has a cathedral and everything.
Yeah, I've actually been to Winchester. I've actually been to the Isle of Wight as well, oddly enough. Ex-girlfriend of mine was from the Isle of Wight. Her dad used to be the Coast Guard bloke there.
Nice.
And just used to run the Coast Guard on the Isle of Wight, just him on his own. So we got to do fun things whenever we went down there, like we sort of go down cliffs on ropes and things like that, which was as they did the training. It was all good fun. And have you always been in Winchester? Is that like hometown, or is that somewhere you migrated to? You're an outsider.
I am an outsider, but I think I would now class it as home. So I'm a Londoner, born and bred. And I say London in the loosest sense, inside the M25, but definitely not in London. So in a lovely little place called Cheam, which sounds a little bit too posh for what it actually is. But grew up there and moved to Winchester when my wife came here to study at university. Then we moved to Scotland and we were in Scotland for 3 years. Then we moved to Leeds and we were in Leeds for 3 years. And then we managed to migrate our way back down to Winchester back in 2011. Okay. So it is now home, I think.
Quite a travelling band then.
A little bit, although it was just me and my wife, first and foremost. We started a family when we came back to Winchester. I think that was why we moved back.
Did I hear you say something? She works in the arts, or?
Yeah, so she studied at Winchester University in contemporary dance.
Okay.
So she is a contemporary dancer. And then she moved to Scotland to go to the Scottish School of Contemporary Dance
Mm.
in Dundee, then moved us to Leeds to go to the Northern School of Contemporary Dance,
Mm.
and then became a professional dancer, which has always been her dream. So
Yeah.
my first half of my career was very much following her and allowing her to have her dreams.
Do you have an arts background as well? I mean, is that what the connection was?
No, actually, youth group was our connection. So we went to the same youth group back in the day. So my wife was actually
As a
12.
youth, as a youth,
Yeah.
you were two youths.
So she caught my eye when we were teenagers,
Wow.
so preteen. So we, yeah, got together when she was 12 and I was 14.
Mm.
And then we broke up because I fancied someone else. That's not good, is it?
Ah, ah,
And then by the time I realized what a fool I was,
yeah.
she was then dating someone else. And I then
Oh
spent two
no.
years trying
Oh
to get her
no.
back, and trying to prove that I was the better man. I say better man. I was a kid. I was like 15 at the time. But then managed to start dating properly when she was 15 and I was 17. And we dated for 4.5 years before we got married. This was back in 1997. So we're 26 years together.
Wow.
Got married in 2001, celebrating our 22-year wedding anniversary this August.
Brilliant. Congratulations.
Thanks.
That's impressive. And how many
I
kids
think
have you
I think the congratulations need to go to her for putting up with me for so long.
got?
To be fair, it's like she needs a medal.
Well, most women do for putting up with us as a species. I think that's a foregone sort of statement, isn't it? In conclusion or something, that's the truth. And those of us who are old enough and wise enough sort of realise that and sort of are very grateful for being tolerated, if nothing else. So there you go. So there was a youth work connection, but you then turned that into a career, didn't you? Youth work.
Yeah. So Hannah is a contemporary dancer. I managed to fall into I would loosely call it the arts. Um, because I went to college, didn't really enjoy it much, and then found myself just attending the dance classes and the performing arts classes.
Right.
It's not the course that I'd signed up to. Nobody ever questioned who I was or why I was there. Um, but then found myself in a
Random
job where
bloke,
we were,
yeah, hanging out. Okay.
yeah, totally. But then found myself in a job where we were touring all over the UK, going into schools and colleges and doing lessons and assemblies and performances and
So like theatre
an
and
end of the
education
week
type
show.
stuff.
Yeah, so very
Cool.
much kind of within education, very much within the arts, if you can call it that, from what I was doing. Um, but yeah, so then through that, kind of Hannah and I were then long distance relationshiping through her GCSEs into her A levels. And then when she finally got to university was when we actually managed to both live back in the same space,
Great.
and got married. Yeah.
Were you still performing at that time? Is that was the route you were on?
No, so basically we're talking 2000 here. So I did the creative kind of performance stuff between 1998 and 2000.
Right.
And then through that time, the thing that got me the most was how young people's perceptions changed in such a short period of time.
Yeah.
Because when we arrived at the beginning of the week, young people were like, oh, so. And then by the end of the week, they were attending the shows that we were putting on, and all that. And I began to think what would happen if I had my own youth group. And so when we moved to Winchester, I went down to Southampton and actually focused on a pastoral course in Southampton of actually how do you engage with young people and build relationships that then carry. When I was a community youth worker, going into schools and supporting projects in the local community, and then that is what then was my job as my wife was pursuing her dance. I then went to Scotland and worked in a project called the Hot Chocolate Trust, which was brilliant and is brilliant. Um, Working with some really vulnerable kids. And it was there that I actually saw young people really dramatically change their lives. And that was kind of through the emotional literacy stuff of helping young people just understand what they were feeling in the things that they were experiencing. and then being able to ask the question. So, do you want to keep feeling
It's
like this?
interesting, though. I mean, sort of, why was it that important to you to sort of help kids, do you think?
Oh, where does it stem from? I think because the job that I was doing when I was touring was so short, we just, it was that impact. It was seeing the young people's mindset change
Mm-hmm.
that I was like, what would happen if we could build these relationships for years? And so the Hot Chocolate Trust was probably the first project where I was really working with the same group of young people over the 3 years that I was there.
Mm-hmm.
And just the impact
Was
that,
helping part of the values of your family in growing up, or is it, putting back into society?
yes, I think almost definitely.
Right.
Whether that's something that my family actively did, and therefore that's where it came from, I don't know. But certainly a passion for disenfranchised young people who didn't grow up in the nicest of homes or didn't have the best kind of family setting, who were experiencing abuse or drug misuse or all that, all the stuff that when you sit and think about it, I think should break your heart,
Yeah. Yeah.
is the stuff that I was like, I want to engage with these young people. Um, and that was kind of the drive in the
I
background.
mean, it's interesting because, I think anybody listening to it would could empathize, but not necessarily want to do direct action. They would maybe want to give some money to a charity or something like that. But you were drawn into wanting to improve things. I guess you'd seen that you could, and you could see that it was done without having to change the whole world. You could work with the kids and help them change, that sort of thing.
Yes. And I think young people, oh, this is going to sound so twee and I hate it, but
Go, be twee. Go on, take the risk. Jump into that
it's,
tweeness.
it's that feeling of kind of like you're saying, kind of when you get set in your ways, young people aren't yet set in their ways. They're trying to figure out what their ways are.
Hmm.
And so if we're not careful, they just follow the path that's out in front of them. And then you get that phase of, well, these are the cards that I've been dealt. And I think kind of what I wanted to show young people is that these aren't the cards that you've been dealt. You can change this. And empowering young people to make those decisions. And then seeing the impact that what happened in their lives when they did make those decisions.
Hmm.
And it's that I think is something that we miss within our young people, is that they are, I believe anyway, that they are longing for people to look up to
Yeah,
and longing
I
for
agree. Yeah.
people to stand against what they see as corrupt and unjust and all that kind of stuff and say, you can make a difference.
Hmm.
You can choose to make a difference, and then empowering them to stand up and make a difference and to be that kind of person.
And seeing transformations is very inspirational stuff. And I think you're right. It is possible with young people in ways that maybe it's not possible with somebody like me who's so set in my ways. So, you need to use a baseball bat to get me out of bed in the morning at a different time. It's like, yeah, I'm like, my rituals and routines are set in stone. But I totally agree. I mean, it's interesting because I think most people might think it's quite depressing listening to all those problems. But is there something about you that you're naturally wanting to find the solutions rather than dwell on the problems? Is that part of who you are, do you think?
I think it is part of who I am.
Right.
I don't know why
Are you one of
it's
those
part of who I am.
irritating glass half full people? You're not one of those annoying people.
No, I'm the person who goes, you've got a glass. That's amazing. I think I'm that person in the room.
Brilliant. I love that glass. I don't give a shit what's in it. It's empty. It's a glass. It's possible it could have some shit in it at some point.
It's got cracks, but it's a glass. It's that kind of feeling. It doesn't matter how shit it gets. Oh, sorry, how bad it gets.
No, that's 9 o'clock. It's fine.
It's past 9 o'clock.
We're not regulated.
It doesn't matter how bad it gets. There's always that kind of glimmer of possibility. I think that's what I bring to the table. Is that there is always hope. I think that's very much a very deep belief that I
But my
have.
experience is hope is core to transformation. I actually want to write about transformation. It's a subject I'm fascinated by, but totally sort of bedazzled by. I'm like a little
Mm.
magpie. Anytime I come across it, I want to collect it. And in my training, there was a bloke there who wrote a book that became quite well known in my field, and a whole chapter on transformations
Mm.
and sort of how that happens. I'm really
But
interested.
I
Alchemy.
think also what I still find fascinating through the training that I do is when people come to me or come back to me. I had a conversation with a lady just the other week, and she said, kind of, the course kick-started something,
Okay.
and it then almost was it began to ricochet, and I found myself talking to other people
Yeah.
who then bounced it back again, and then somebody else bounced it back again, and the way they phrased it was, it's almost like someone or something is trying to wake me up
Hmm.
to this. And I think that's what I love about what I do.
Oh, yeah. So you were in youth work, working with troubled young people, marginalised young people at risk, as they say,
Yeah.
at risk of various things, not getting into education, employment, training, and diversion. Sort of, I'm just going to ask a question. It's not really the field you're in anymore, but what do you think about the field now? Because there's often talk about it not existing or having been destroyed, and I mean, that's absolute tragedy because I've done tons
Yeah.
of youth work myself. But have you got thoughts on what's going on at the moment?
I think as okay, I'm trying to figure out what I actually think here. In our local centre, so in Winchester, the majority of face-to-face youth work has collapsed
Yeah,
due to lack of funding.
yeah,
Um, the engagement of young people has pulled away because of social media.
yeah.
Young people's ability to have conversations with one another is beginning to get lost.
Hmm.
Um, and I find my kids in social situations where another young person is on a device, and then you have 4, 5, 6 people around that person watching them engage with their device.
Hmm.
No one's talking to each other. My kids are 10, 7, and 5. No one's running around. No one's playing, and it scares me.
Hmm.
The disengage that we could find ourselves in 5, 10 years time. And that scares me because my kids will be 15, 13, 10, and 5 years old. I've got a baby as well. And the thing is that I'm trying to find the youth workers who are going into the schools, who are actually going to where the young people are. Because the old-fashioned youth work was the young people will come to us, but now they're just not coming. And the ability for youth work to go into schools is dwindling. And yet that's where the young people are. That's where the impact can be had. That's where the relationships begin to build. And then you put on events that the young people then are drawn to, and they are then drawn to socialize with their peers outside of the school grounds.
Yeah.
And it's I think it's so sad that the local youth worker is an art that is being lost. I was
I'm
talking to
with you.
someone about, well, why
With
don't
you.
you go to college and learn? He said there's no courses anywhere.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you can't even
Because there's no
learn
career, so there's no
this
point
anymore.
learning. I
Yeah.
totally agree with you that there are pressures now on young people that never used to exist,
Yes. And
and
it's almost like a
people don't
melting
get it
pot.
just how tough it is to be a young person
Yes.
these days.
And the peer pull of young people towards each other
Yeah.
is shocking, scary,
Hmm.
because young people are beginning to parent one another
Yeah,
more
without
than
a doubt.
the
Without a
parents'
doubt. That's
engagement
right. Yeah,
with
yeah.
young
I see
people.
that. I see that.
And then we begin to
Sexualization of kids is
edge
horrific.
into
Yeah,
all the attachment stuff, and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it when you look at it, it gets very sad very quickly.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, I mean, we've got problems, I think, in the UK around these issues, and quite significant and serious problems.
Mm.
And then we have this frivolity around these narcissists in power
Mm.
who think they're more important. It's like, I just don't care that they've resigned. It's like, go away and put some people in there who can think about these issues and start doing something about it, because
But I think the difficulty is that we don't know what the answers are.
Yeah.
Or certainly the people in power don't seem to ask the right questions of the people who do know.
I think the people in power have no interest. I think that's quite clear. They have no interest anymore. They need to be disposed of, and some new people need to come in who actually want to do something. And that's just where we are. And we're in this limbo as a country, I think, at the moment. It's without, I mean, I'm sort of not getting onto a party political thing. I don't give a shit. I don't care really. I stopped being tribal about politics a long time ago, but there are certain core issues in the world and in society that we need to address. And whatever the policies, we need to have the policies. And it's fine. I don't need to agree with the policies, but at the moment there's such a lack of direction or sort of any sort of engagement, anything sort of rational or realistic. And
it's sad because there's so much evidence out there. There's so much evidence of what we could do that would begin to make some really positive shifts and changes.
Yeah,
and yet,
absolutely.
And yet it feels like the people who get it are not empowered to do anything about it.
Yeah. No, I agree. There needs to be a sort of significant shift, I think, in terms of those that are making decisions who, if you put some, I guess it's just it needs a fresh bunch of people who are energized to want to try and do something, rather than the current bunch who are just energized to try and defend themselves from the defensible. And that's
it comes for me. It still constantly comes back to the right people being empowered to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And at the moment we feel lost because we know something needs to happen, but nobody is empowered to grab the bull by the horns and do what is tough but needs to be done.
Yeah. So let's come back. I mean, that was an interesting segment. I just wondered. I mean, I think it's really interesting stuff, because the more people are thinking about these issues, the better, rather than the dramas and the personalities. It's the issues that are really important, and those are the conversations that are really important. So I like having them. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's come back a little bit. So you were in youth work and you were noticing this thing that you want to call emotional intelligence. Is that right?
So I frame it as emotional literacy, whatever kind of that is. The way I explain it, which is hugely oversimplified, is understand what you feel, understand why you're feeling like that. Mm-hmm. Because in my experience, only when you begin to put those two together, can you then begin to ask the question, do I want to keep feeling like this?
Okay.
Because then if the answer is no, you can start to piece together the questions of, so what do I need to do to start shifting and changing stuff? And it was that process.
How were you getting kids to that point where they would be able to answer those first two questions?
Oh, goodness. You're taking me back lots of years here, Noel. Yeah.
You're not that old.
Oh, but the time. Look, so I left.
Just ridiculous.
I left youth work 8 years ago.
What are you, 21 or something? You're actually talking to an old man, so don't try that trick on me.
It does feel like a long time ago. So a big part of what we did is we would get young people together as a group, and it was called Group. Interesting kind of name, but through that,
we began like having a dog and calling it dog.
Yeah,
hello,
kind
dog.
of. Yeah, and but through that process, we began to allow young people to share their story.
Right.
And in these groups, the dynamic that began to emerge was, let's say, you were bullying me. Thanks, Noel. Cheers for that. But then we became part of this group where you began to understand me better. And then through that relationship, you then began to protect me when you saw me being bullied by other people.
Yeah.
And so the group dynamic became a real kind of hub, a real hive of emotional vulnerability, of honesty, of support. And going back to your word of tribe, there there became this family, for want of a better phrase, where young people began to look out for each other.
Yeah.
And support one another. And in Winchester, there's a fantastic guy called Andy Hyder who runs these in the school. And he does it with every year group from year 7 right through to year 11. And the dynamic that it creates of support mechanisms is brilliant. But it was through that we were then able to get to a point of helping bring the understanding of emotion. So there's no such thing as a bad emotion, but sometimes we're told that you can't have certain emotions, or you shouldn't react in certain ways because of emotions. And what that then does is it shuts people down in those emotions. You can't feel sad, you can't feel shame, you can't feel anger, you can't kind of feel embarrassed, you can't feel this, you got to push through it, you got to, and so young people just begin to shut that stuff down. And then you find adults who have shut it down for so many years that then you start talking about it and they're like, I don't know how to process these emotions, I'm not allowed to have these emotions. And so it just kind of ripples through generations. And so I still find myself in front of executives and directors seeing these ripples still play out.
Yeah.
Because they believe that the emotions they're experiencing shouldn't be expressed.
Yeah.
Which from an emotional literacy side of things is hugely dangerous and crippling for lots of people in lots of ways. So that was kind of the real drive, was helping young people have language around the emotions they're experiencing so as they could start to help verbalize
it. Seems to be a theme. I'm going to interrupt because I would say something like this from what you're saying, that the ability to understand, process and share emotional material, you can't be in a group. It's not possible because that's the fundamental basis of a group, or a healthy functioning group, if you like, a group that can then go on to do stuff. And groups can do more than the sum of the parts. I mean, that's the magic of groups, that once they're working, they can achieve extraordinary things. And without that capacity to be in healthy groups, you're done for in life. You know, you just don't have the ability to progress, because being part of healthy, functioning, productive is another word, groups, is the fundamental skill that we need in life to be able to succeed in anywhere at all, right?
Yes. And I think where that's pulled me to is therefore trying to understand in a whole mental health arena of, so what does positive mental health, or kind of a positive mental health strategy, or what does that look like?
So hang on. Right.
So that's kind of a big jump.
You've just confused. You've just confused. Surely mental health means going to see a doctor because you're really depressed, right? Isn't that mental health?
Well, that's where we are at the moment. Sure.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Let's talk about that, because
yeah.
I mean, the conversation has moved massively. I mean, so I don't know if we've got there yet in the conversation, but so I became a mental health trainer in 2009, way before mental health was ever a cool thing to talk about. And the conversation was mental health equals mental health illnesses. There was no conversation around what our mental health actually was. And we've seen the conversation change and move, but I still don't think we really know what.
We tend to talk about well-being now, don't we? But you're talking about positive mental health, which is, I guess, the same stuff. Yeah.
Is it, Noel?
I'm asking the questions here, not you. You're answering them. Get on with it, Sonny Jim.
I don't know if it is the same.
Okay.
I find the language of well-being almost.
Right. So well-being, positive mental health, and mental health. Come on, start talking back to me about.
Oh my goodness, how do we unpick this in the 2.5 minutes that we got? You
got longer than that.
Okay, so no health without mental health. We understand that. In the same way, there's no health without physical health. But I think if we're not careful, we look at well-being as being the gym of mental health. You know, so physical health, I know that I should probably do more exercise and eat more healthily. The fact that I don't do those things is kind of my own fault, but at least I know what I should be doing with my physical health.
Yeah.
But even if I say, right, I'm going to join a gym, which is the tool to get fit, and
Well,
what
I
I want
would
to do
question
now.
that, but I understand the premise.
But
Yeah.
the processing is, so I join a gym, and the process or the thing that I want to achieve is that I want to lose weight.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's why I'm joining the gym. That's why I'm engaging with this tool. And yet I walk into the gym and all I see is the machines,
Yeah.
and the weights. And so I engage with these machines because I feel like that's what I should be doing. And yet I'm not therefore engaging with the right exercises to get me to the place that I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when we look at mental health, we then put this whole thing of, well, let's look at our well-being, which is, let's look at some tools that are meant to get me where I want to go into positive mental health. And yet I don't know what the right exercises are
Mm-hmm.
to get me to the conclusion that I want to be at. And so then it becomes a much more, and this is a well-banded round phrase of holistic process of person-centered. What works for you isn't going to work for other people, and all of that stuff. But when we actually begin to understand this whole group, tribe, culture,
Mm-hmm.
feeling safe, the psychological safety and all that kind of stuff, and we begin to look at how the workplace may be actually contributing to poor mental health,
Mm-hmm.
and to mental health issues, and we begin to tackle what those cultural impact is, so as we are in a more positive place within our relationships and within our culture and with the way we work and the work-life balance and all these kind of fantastic words and phrases, then we begin to build a strategy towards what that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And we begin to move away from the frame where I think we are a little bit at the moment, which is mental health illnesses. How do we escape those things? And
Yeah.
now in the
I mean,
conversation of this,
I would
now I'm
agree with
really
you.
aware.
That's right.
I'm so aware that it's a real overarching simplistic process. And what I don't want to do is I don't want to say that if people are experiencing mental health illnesses, let's escape those. No, that's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, how do we help people with lived experience of mental health illnesses thrive on a daily basis? Because we're putting enough tools, well-being things in place that actually they're having more good days than bad.
Yeah.
And are therefore thriving more than struggling.
Yeah.
And therefore going, actually, my mental health is no longer in a negative place, it's constantly in a positive place.
Yeah. No, I
And
agree. I mean, there's a very
the
strong
dynamic has moved, it's
there's a
shifted.
there's a very strong argument that goes something like this: that mental health is not the absence of mental illness. But if you have mental illness, you can also still have health and well-being,
Absolutely,
including psychological health and well-being. But you just happen to have a mental illness, a defined mental illness.
yes.
And then even within the active phase of a mental illness, it's then possible to have strategies in place that enhance your well-being as much as possible within that context, right? That's what
Yes.
you meant, yeah.
And I think there's another kind of banding which I'm still trying to get my head around, which is this concept of healing from mental health illnesses.
Yeah.
In the same way that your body heals from bones breaking and other things. And sometimes you need pins to help and aid with that. And sometimes you need ongoing physio to help and aid with that. But there is a healing process to this. And I still hear the conversations where people begin to own their mental health illnesses. And I struggle with that. I find that really hard. When people say, yeah, but this is my depression or this is my anxiety creeping in. And there's an ownership to it. And I also want to recognize that, please, I don't dismiss it in any way, shape, or form. I just don't understand it fully, you know. And
what makes you uncomfortable about that?
About the ownership?
Yeah.
Because I think I see the person, and I think mental health as two very different things. And I think when mental health becomes a part of a person, it then becomes very difficult to unpick what is the character and person versus what is the attributes of the mental health.
So what do you think about things like, say, AA, for example, where people go and say, my name is, and I'm an alcoholic? Would that be the same level of discomfort for you, or is there something else going on there? I'm genuinely interested Peter. I'm
no,
not putting you on the spot.
I don't think I've ever put the two conversations together, but doing so makes me go, that's an interesting one. Because with the AA process is that I need to understand that this thing is fighting at me all the time.
Yeah.
And I need to put the protections in place all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I can understand that in the realm of mental health illnesses, I need to put the protections in place all the time because this thing wants to attack me. It wants to get me every day. And every day I need to put the boundary in place. It's almost like, I'm not saying, oh, come on, stop it. But I am saying, okay, what protections do you need today? How can I help you keep those protections in place? What do I need to do to stand alongside you and fight on your behalf against this stuff to create an environment where you, just what I mean, where you thrive and where you...
It makes absolute sense to me. This is a platform for you to explain where you're coming from, because I mean, I'm really interested in this field and in the fact that, in the time I've been involved in it, which is professionally 30 years post-qualification, but prior to that, another 10 years. So I do trump you in terms of age. Oh, I don't want to use trump.
Only just. No.
Sorry, I said that word, people. Oh, I'm sorry. So, I mean, the language, the ways of conceptualizing, the ways of talking about, the ways of experiencing and defining experience in this space has radically changed over the time that I've been working in it. And I think for the better, I have to say, for the better. And there is much more conversation these days in what I tend to think of asset-based approaches rather than deficit-based approaches, which is what I think you're generally talking about. And our mental health services, the professional services, historically and still to a large extent, are focused on deficit-based approaches. So you have to have an illness or a problem to get a service, which is, I understand, and there's a certain rational understanding of that, but it's also self-defeating because it makes people ill.
And you have to be ill enough.
Yeah,
to get the help and support.
Increasingly you have to be even more ill than you used to have to be to get that. And so it's a sort of vicious cycle, I think. And I see, and I've seen people over the years washed through these systems again and again and again and again. And it's the only way you get resources, and it's if you're poor, it's a good way of getting resources because it increases your PIP payments and things like that. So there's an incentive, perverse incentives built into the system without a doubt. And also I'm a great fan of preventative health approaches rather than treatment approaches. And a lot of things are preventative and are about the way we structure things. So that's where I'm coming from. And I think those conversations are really good. But it's always important to have this conversation about how do we talk about this stuff. And what you're doing, to me, what it seems to me you're doing is talking about it, but trying to also be sensitive to people with lived experience and yet another person coming along and saying you should feel this about it rather and it seems that you're trying to avoid doing that, which I think is very respectful. So I understand your tentative way of dealing with it, but nevertheless it is a really important conversation. I want to go back a little bit. So you're noticing in groups with kids and young people, and you'll notice this literacy issues, and you're noticing the empathy and the transformations and changes that grow. What was the next step for you career-wise in terms of you're running these youth groups, but what was the next bit of your development?
So so basically we went from Winchester, kind of starting all that, then moving to Scotland and the Hot Chocolate Trust, which became hugely influential for me, and where I really started to see that dramatic change in young people. And then my wife and I moved from Scotland down to Leeds to get to the Northern School of Contemporary Dance. And for a very short period, I ended up working with Connections back in the day, as it was, which was where you were working with year 11 students heading into college who were on the CD borderline of results. And basically what support's available to those young people to help them boost up to a C or enter into apprenticeships at college or things like that. And I suddenly found myself in a very administrative role that really upset my life well-being
Don't take this the
because
wrong way, but I just can't imagine you being any good at administration.
let's go for appalling administration and just leave it there. And that I have had to learn so many
Absolute nuclear disaster
strategies,
zone.
pretty much. And my wife, bless her, the partner of my life and partner of my company, is the reason why so many balls don't get dropped.
Yeah.
And to any of my clients out there who may be listening, the only reason a ball has ever got dropped, purely my fault. And I take full ownership of getting dates wrong or information wrong. But
I'm always 2 months behind in my invoicing, for example. It's like it's the last thing I do.
Yeah. So I found myself in Leeds, working in a school, trying to find these year 11 students with a head of year who would not let year 11 students out of any classes who are on this CD borderline.
Yeah.
Because if they come out their lessons, they're more likely to get a D.
That's right.
Compared to, so I spent literally, I was doing maternity cover, and I spent literally months trying to find young people and doing next to none actual face-to-face work.
Right.
And it was soul destroying. And so again, through that, I was like, I've got to get back in front of young people. So through that time, I then set up my company, which then began to focus in on the PSHCE curriculum in schools, which, if you know anything about PSHCE or schools, it's everything you need to learn in life that you don't get taught in a normal lesson. That's your PSHCE. And then I got involved with a company who were doing mental health training in the workplace. And I suddenly found myself delivering mental health training from an emotional literacy perspective, thinking, hang on, emotional literacy and mental health. I need more information on this.
Okay.
And then it was through that time back in 2009 when I came across Mental Health First Aid England, who were doing mental health training. And I then became a mental health first aid instructor back in 2009. And that really kicked my understanding and desired impact in the mental health world.
Right. So tell us about mental health first aid. What on earth is that? So you go around with a little bag of tools?
I should. So mental health first aid, for anyone
who
doesn't know,
you got a little blue flashing light, or that you can get with?
Kind of, but no. So mental health first aid is very much the first aid approach to mental health illnesses. So if you think about,
still, I don't have no idea what you're talking about.
I do. First aid, a person falls down in the street, cracks their head open, blood pouring out, and the first aider goes, "I'm the first aider." And then they kind of kneel down next to this person and they go through their
magically pull a bag of stuff from the hip. Yeah.
And then the first aid approach is, okay, what do I do in this immediate situation? And to be fair, let's call 999 and just make sure that you're okay. And so mental health first aid is very much that kind of approach, is that somebody in front of me may be showing some signs and symptoms of mental health illnesses, whatever those things are. You'll begin to realize we know more about it than we recognize or realize, because we've all had bad days and we know what that feels like. But also, if you begin to know the people around you, you begin to see things change. And now we see it a lot more than we actually want to, because sometimes we shy away from opening up the conversations because we think, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I do the wrong thing? What if I don't actually know them well enough? John knows them better. He'll ask.
And the classic can of worms thing. If I open that can, then that's it. Yeah.
For me, the mental health first aider is to try and find people in an organization that go, I'm the mental health first aider. And they go towards that person in the same way that the first aider goes towards that person. They see the crisis, they move towards it, rather than they see the crisis and look for somebody else. Anyone? And so that for me is the dynamic of the mental health first aid.
So what do you teach people on the courses that are useful?
So we cover, so the way I introduce the mental health first aid course is with a health warning, because it's 2 days. And in this 2 days, we're going to cover anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, bipolar, self-harm, eating disorders, and suicide.
Yeah, that's cheery.
It's a happy course.
Cheery stuff.
Yeah.
That's nice. Yeah. And that's like my normal working day for me, by the way.
Yeah. And so it's very much about giving people the skills to notice it and then where to signpost to. I think that's the main thing, is that they're not the professional. They're not the person to diagnose. They're the person who goes, have you talked to somebody about this? Have you actually got any help? Are you seeing someone? Have you been to the doctor? Did you know that this could be a vitamin D deficiency and not depression? Because have you been to the doctor and talked to someone about it? Have you? And again, coming back to that, let's take all the stigmas and discriminations away from this conversation and empower people to have the confidence to talk about it much more readily.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you give
that's
people
what I want to do.
Tools and skills, which is knowledge and education and sort of basic sort of conversation skills, I guess, active listening skills and confidence,
all those kind of things.
And then where the resources are and where you should signpost people.
Yes. Yeah. And a lot of people do it in their workplace. So then it's about, in your workplace, what does your work have available? Not just for you as the mental health first aider who's supporting someone, but for the person that you're trying to support. Yes. But also what's available for that person's family or friendship group, or it's just trying to think a little bit outside the box of what help and support and resources are available.
Right. So you got involved with that. And then what was the next step for you?
So then I was doing youth work and mental health training from 2009 up to 2015. Jumped through different youth work projects and did a whole load of stuff with that. But basically got to a point where I felt I was too busy doing mental health stuff to do youth work too well, but too busy doing youth work to do mental health stuff very well.
So and became,
and I think through whatever powers that are out there, came to the realization that my job needed to do something, and they made me redundant. And they gave me a redundancy package that was probably about 3 months worth of salary just before my second child was born, through the Christmas period. And it just managed to give me the breaker that I needed to basically go freelance, self-employed, and just do the mental health training. And to be honest, it was the best thing that's happened.
Right.
So
I have a similar experience, and when I was made redundant, I was like, I can't go find another job, and I just had to go out into the world and set my company up. And it turns out I'm pretty good at it.
Yeah.
Who knew?
Who'd have thought?
Yeah. Oh, I wouldn't have jumped. I had to be pushed. But that's the way it is. But I guess I also had the mindset that says, okay, what are the opportunities in this situation? And I guess you have that mindset as well, that rather than go down. And so you set up which company at that point?
So at that point, it was a partnership with me and my wife, and we had called it SEEDS, which stood for Strengthen, Encourage, Empower, Develop, and Support. It was a good one. And then realized that it felt more like a garden company than anything else with the name. But we carried that through to 2000 sometime soon, recently, about 2021, I think, we turned it into Peter Larkum Limited, which again does what it says on the tin. Hi, Pete. That's me. And we were toying with all different kinds of names around what we were going to change it to, and people were like, "But Pete, you sell you are the thing that people are buying." And although I would love to have other trainers that work alongside me, I don't at this time. And if that were to change, then great. But at the moment, it's very much the work that I do going into companies and exploring culture and positive mental health and all that kind of stuff.
So tell me about the disconnect between emotional literacy and mental health, and whether you found a way of bridging those things, because I think those two things are really interesting concepts. I mean, it would seem to most people, surely they go together, but I know what you mean. They don't necessarily at all. And in fact, much mental health has no emotional literacy whatsoever. Like go speak to a psychiatrist on a ward, right? Seriously, but folks.
So excuse me. So I think the dynamic for me in the courses that I deliver is yes, I'm there to deliver the product of mental health first aid, but I take it very much from the person sat in the room perspective. So I have lots of people who come thinking, oh, I'm going to learn how to look after people.
Mm-hmm.
And very regularly, people come to me and say, I've learned more about myself in this course and what I need to do to look after myself than I ever thought I would. And so there is still that understanding what you feel, understanding why you feel like it kind of conversation going on in the background of everything I do without even realizing that it's happening a lot of the time. Because it constantly comes back with, if you want to support someone with their mental health, you need to make sure your mental health is in a good place.
Yeah.
And then the question comes down, is mental health contagious? Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And it's not, but if you spend a lot of time with someone who's really struggling with their mental health, it is going to have an impact on you. You know,
personality adaptation is a fairly standard understanding.
And so you can't. Here it's got a lady who is helping a friend abseil down a cliff, and the idea behind it is, if she's not plugged into something, if she's not attached to the wall, the likelihood of her actually getting pulled over is really quite high.
Yeah.
And if we're supporting people with mental health illnesses, but we don't know what our support networks are and how to keep ourselves in a healthy place, the likelihood of us experiencing mental health struggles is really quite high. Yeah. And so a lot of it is around, if we are people who want to take on this role, then we've got to become much more aware of our emotional conversation and what we've got going on.
Sure.
So as we become stronger at actually saying no.
I think I know what your answer is going to be to this, but what do you think about the whole movement around mental fitness, which was something that the Royals brought up through Heads Together and stuff like that? What's your view on that sort of approach to it?
Good question.
No, it's not an immediate yes from you. I can see you're sort of thinking, how do I say something without having one of the royal family?
Okay, let's look at it. Let's think of it like this. Hate is probably too strong a word. If anyone knows me, exercise is not something they would associate with me.
No, like administration.
Yeah, basically chalk and cheese. Basically just not. It doesn't. I don't enjoy it. I don't. When somebody says, "Oh, let's go for a run," my answer is no. Quite frankly, if somebody says, "Hey, Pete, do you want to get coffee and cake?"
Your answer is something slightly more blue than that.
Yeah, let's go for coffee and cake. Yes, okay, let's do that. And so, in my head, as soon as you say mental fitness, there's a struggle to achieve it.
Okay.
I've got to force myself to do this. I've got to, and there's something which for me is a real uphill struggle. And what I'm trying to do is, rather than have positive mental health is up here and we're on a slippery slope towards mental health illnesses, is what if it was the other way around and it was a slippery slope towards positive mental health?
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like? Oh my gosh, I want to go there. Let's get there quicker.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of a broader conversation about how we've made health look unhealthy.
Yes.
And difficult to achieve. We have. I mean, it really is.
Let's go for mental fitness. I'm never going to get there.
Okay.
Because I'd rather sit on a couch and eat cake.
Yeah. I'm interested as well, because we are getting towards the end of the show. So told you it would get
we would get there.
So tell me about positive mental health, what you mean by that.
Oh, wow. I think through this whole conversation, I think what I've been trying to convey is that I'm a culture shifter. I never think I've labeled myself like that. I like to see.
I actually thought you were going to say something else, and I thought I'd better cut him off if he goes in that
direction. But so a big part for me is that, yes, okay, mental health first aid is a part.
Yeah.
But it's certainly not the end result. Mm-hmm. Companies are too quick at going, all right, let's find what we need to do and tick that box. That type of language frustrates me.
Yeah.
Because it's not taking the conversation seriously enough.
Yeah.
Is that if you're serious about positive mental health and what positive mental health looks like, it's a cultural shift. It's an absolute dynamic from the top CEOs and executives of the company to the new intern coming in fresh from university. It's looking at how the culture of the organization becomes a place to thrive, not somewhere where people are simply surviving from day by day by day by day by day to the weekend. Yeah. And that means that we need to begin to change the language. We need to change the provision. We need to look at what is pulling us down and find the remedy to begin to pull us up. We need to find the work-life balance that works and doesn't increase presenteeism and doesn't increase leavism and doesn't increase sickness absence and doesn't increase staff turnover, which is what we are fighting against at the moment. I get passionate about this stuff now. And then if a company comes to me and says, Pete, we want to see the culture of mental health in this workplace change.
Yeah.
I'm on board.
Okay. So it's about looking at that whole system approach. For an individual, if an individual is trying to understand in practical terms what positive mental health is, what sort of words would you give them that they can orient towards?
I like the language of thriving.
Okay.
In life.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And what does that look like? Because it's going to look differently for every single person you ask.
Absolutely.
And so then it's about, so what is it for you?
Yeah.
And it's not actually, I want to get paid and do nothing, because productivity in itself produces positive mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. You know? Yeah.
Getting up, getting out, meeting people, engage with the workplace is actually a huge tool for positive mental health if we can make it a place where people thrive.
Yeah.
But then we've got to begin to tackle the language that's currently going on and allowing people to say, actually, I can't. I need to stop.
Yeah.
I need to break.
Yeah.
Sorry, I need to pause, not break, but I need to pause.
Well, being a bit broken is all right. I'm a bit broken. I don't mind being broken.
Find me someone who isn't. No.
I guess that's the point, isn't it? We're sort of towards the end, but I want to make sure that people understand how they can get hold of you, what projects that you're involved with at the moment. So mentality is one of the projects, and
so let's go
about mentality quickly.
Let's go at kind of culture shift. So mentality is a 1 hour online video course. Right. Mentality.work. You pay your money, you get access. 3 simple modules, 20 minutes.
And the first one is individual, for a group, or
so you pay per person. Yeah. And as soon as you start to hit your hundreds and your thousands of people in the company, then the cost starts to drop dramatically. Yeah. But the idea there is that it's aimed at an entire organization.
Yeah.
I believe that everyone in an organization should have mental health training as a requirement year on year, just like you do with your hazards to chemical substances or your lifting kind of videos that people do. There needs to be something which gives people a universal language. That's what mentality does.
Great.
It doesn't talk about mental health illnesses. It talks about good days and bad days, life. So then you got your training for everyone. Then you got your mental health first aiders, which is kind of your framework for how to access the help and support.
And where's that? Where can people find that bit of your work?
So Mental Health First Aid England website, or you can find kind of courses that I do. So I do open courses up in London every other month, courses in Winchester where I live every other month. And
have you got a website where people can find what you do?
Yeah, so all that is peterlarkum.com, and Larkum is spelled Larkum.
Is it peterhavingalark.com?
Yeah, kind of. peterlarkum.com.
Larkingabout.com.
No, don't confuse things, because otherwise you'll get the COMBEs and the Larkins and the Larkhomes and the Larkhams and all sorts.
So peterlarkum.com. I'm sure James.
Absolutely. And then, so that's kind of your mentality for everyone. Mental health first aid is your then skeletal structure of people in the organization that can find the help and support. We've just launched a brand new managers course, which is all about skills to build a healthy and inclusive well-being culture. So this is very much about the manager and their role to create a culture within their team that is able to focus on this positive. What does positive mental health look like?
Yeah, exactly.
Then we're currently developing a C-suite training for your top senior executives.
Yeah.
And the idea behind that is that they need to start having the right language to shift it through the organization.
Great.
So what we're then trying to do is we're trying to hit multiple layers within an organization to see that cultural shift.
Great. Awesome.
Thanks.
We have to leave it there. You stay there. We're right at the end of the show. It's been fantastic to have you on, Peter. You stay here. Folks, that's it. We're done for this week. We've got another guest next week. Got no idea who it is because I never have any idea who it is, but it'll be somebody brilliant because it always is. But really look forward to seeing you all again next week. Thanks, Peter, for being with us. And I hope you all have a great week in between now and whatever the 21st of June, is it? 7 days? 21? 14 plus 7, 21? Is that right? That's 21st of June. See you all then. Take care. Good night.